Hello, everyone, and welcome to Garden Gossip, the home and garden show, with your hosts, Lisa and Nancy, editors of BigBlendMagazine.com.
Well, on today's Big Blend Radio Garden Gossip Show, we're going to Montana to chat about organic gardening and composting with Jackie Marie Beyer. She is host of the Organic Gardener podcast, where they interview organic gardeners and farmers all about the world of organic gardening, everything from aquaponics and beekeeping to seeds, raised beds, and even worms. Yes, vermiculture. We love worms around here. You can go to her website. It's organicgardenerpodcast.com. They've got some great free downloads on there as well. But Jackie, how are you?
I'm awesome this morning, Lisa, and I'm so excited to be here.
We're glad to have you here. I mean, when we think about organic gardening, you know, a lot of times most of us won't think Montana and snow get along with organic gardening. But apparently you and Mike, your husband, are making it work.
Well, and actually one of my amazing guests on my podcast, this woman, Mandy Girth, her and her husband, and they're like these rock star millennials that are growing, like they farm for the market. And she talks about being in Montana is actually easier than where she grew up in Indiana because the cold kills off a lot of the bugs and we don't have as many pests here as other people deal with. And like definitely on my show, I think the number one thing people talk about is time. But one of the second biggest things they talk about is pests. So we're actually situated pretty good that way. And then the other thing that we do have is really, really long days in the summer. So sometimes that'll help us catch up. But it's not without its challenges, and there's certainly things we can't grow here. But it's actually a pretty good climate.
How did you get involved in gardening? Is this something you did as a kid or as a family or for Mike? How did this all start for the two of you?
So that's a great question. So I actually grew up in New York, and my mom is a gardener, but as many of my guests say, I did not want to have anything to do with gardening when I was a kid. And but just, her always having the garden and liking to be in the garden. And then my husband grew up in Colorado, and we met here in Montana, and he's kind of always had a garden, I think, since he like he first got married and had his own kids. And his mom always had a garden, like when he was a kid. So he's 14 years older than I am. So when he was a kid, they had a 1,200 acre ranch, and we're, I don't know, like 65 miles from like the really biggest town. So his mom, like, they had a garden. A lot of their food came from their garden or their neighbors' gardens, or, they had cows, and they had to, what his mom grew. They had four hungry boys. So a lot of, I think, what he learned was from her. And then we have a really unique path because, like, when we first got married back in the early 90s, we didn't even have running water for 6 years before we dug our first shallow well. And then even after we dug that wasn't really enough to water the lawn, or, we could have like a few small garden beds. So we dug a deep well, I don't know, a few years ago. And then my husband built what I call the mini farm. And so we've just kind of really slowly we're going to be married 25 years this June, been building, starting with very small, like 2 4x8 beds. And just over the years, we've added more and added more. And I say we with like a bit of, I'm not really the gardener. He does like 99% of the work. But the one thing that you wanted to talk about today was compost. And that is one of my more like, I always collect the compost at our house. I eat a ton of the vegetables. I eat way more out of the garden because I really like to eat salads, and I put vegetables onto everything. So, nice. I have learned that way watching him, and then I contribute to the compost, which people think composting is complicated, but it really isn't. Like, there's some really simple tips to help you build successful compost. And even as I'm looking outside, like, we've been in blizzard all week. I'm looking at the snow.
Wow.
We're still collecting compost now. We're throwing in our bin right on top of the snow. When, everything melts, it's just going to help it decompose more. The one thing you have to watch out for are rodents, critters getting into your compost. We have 2 dogs and 3 cats, so we don't have as big of a problem with that here. But, my mom on Long Island has a bigger problem. And they have a huge rabbit explosion in the city where my mom grew up on Long Island. So she has to be a little more careful another thing I always tell people is that like fish bones or fish skin or fish heads, anything like any kind of fish is super good for your compost, and that's another thing that animals will kind of get into. But and I don't
Right.
know, do you want me to talk a little bit since we kind of got on that topic of compost, like what you would put in compost if people have questions about it?
Well, yeah, the one thing about composting is interesting. When we lived in the high desert out near Joshua Tree, now I know you're in national park country too. We moved into this place, and our house, it still had the soil really needed to be amended. I mean, we're talking high desert plus the chemicals were still in the ground from whenever they built this place, and because the people after had never really amended it. And we went through, I mean, we had little midget plants, like little teeny things coming up when we planted things because the soil was so, just drained. And so we did a lot of amending. Actually, we used organic mechanic soil that mostly people use back east with Mark Hyland's Soil Company. So his stuff really worked because it's all organic. And then we used some manure to really bring some life back into it. But the other thing we learned about was what was called bokashi. And we actually, because I was just thinking, because you talked about fish and using that, you could actually, it's like making a tea with this. It would actually break down meat and bones. And you could clean your drains with this stuff, but I mean, you'd have to put like a little bit to thousands of, like a ton of water because it was so strong. It would clean your drains. But that stuff, I mean, worked magic on our soil. So have you experimented with that, or are you mostly doing like the leaves and the peelings and stuff like that?
Yeah, we mostly just stick to leaves, peelings, grass clippings, any kind of like, leftover greens from the garden, like squash leaves or beet greens or, anything that your potato, the types of potatoes, things like that. But what's bokashi? Like, can you spell that?
Bokashi. Let me look it up. Yeah, because it's like a yeast, and so it's really neat. Bokashi. It works in just about everything. It's like making a tea almost. We just put it in a big tub in the kitchen, and you would add water to it in your things, and it would become the stew. And then you just tap it out and add a whole bunch of water to it. I'm going to have to look it up because bokashi. It's Bokashi compost. Bokashi. Bokashi. It's a fermenting system. We like fermenting.
Did you
things.
get that from Mark Hyland? I just interviewed him last week.
No, that's not
like
from
that's
Mark
why
Hyland.
we're talking. Oh.
No, Mark Hyland has. He makes this amazing. He does a lot with biochar, and he makes amazing soils. You can get them online now too, which is cool. And I remember there being coconut husk, and everything is very organic. He's a very organic company, so we got that from him. But bokashi is what else we use because you could put dairy, you could put meat. It's really good. It's like probiotics for your soil. But it's bokashi, Bokashi.
That's amazing. I'm going to have to look into that because, we've never put like dairy or any kind of meat parts in our compost.
Yeah, that's always been that big
no-no. Either, like he feeds his chickens.
Oh, wow.
He doesn't like them to eat meat. I know some people don't care about that, but he doesn't like his chickens to eat any kind of meat or anything like that. That we use
so
their
you guys
chicken.
have chickens? You have chickens?
Yeah.
How cool. That's cool. Good for your soil, right? To have the chicken scratch out there. And do you add that to your compost, or do you use it at all in your garden?
Yeah. Big challenge we have is that I finally talked Mike into letting the chickens out of their pen after like 10 years. And then the chickens now get into the garden, so they don't get into the mini farm. So we're having, because somehow we have to teach, and I know people say clip their wings and they won't be able to fly once you pen them up back in their cage. They can only get into your garden, but I don't know. I haven't done that. So we have to figure out what we're going to do about that. But yeah, we've always had the chickens for the manure, and I always say the eggs are the, topping on the cake. But, once you have chickens, it's really hard to eat store-bought eggs. And but yeah, the chicken manure is excellent for the soil. And just you were talking about reclaiming your property, and I know for like organic farm standards, you have to wait 3 years from a property for that to go out. But another thing that like my guests have talked about a lot on my show, because soil health is definitely like the biggest thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like that is the key. Like your healthy soil. If you don't have healthy soil, you're just basically done for it. But one of the things that several people have talked about is you have to really watch where you get your manure from. If you're getting any kind of cow manure, then you have to make sure it doesn't come from any kind of cows that have eaten weed-free hay, because that means that the hay has the chemicals on it, and that has ruined several garden beds. And like some people like have like even had it like in one bed and not another bed because they got like it from a new source. And so that's something. And I talked to a lady who works at a nursery around here in this area, and she said like there was one summer where everybody kind of got it from this one source, and their gardens were just ruined. You know, things died and their leaves turned nasty colors. And so that's something you have to be really like where you're getting your source of manure. And then, you know, a healthy soil, like that's the one thing about gardening. It takes a lot of dirt. It takes a lot of you know, it's hard to just, you know, have enough compost from your own scraps and waste to replenish a garden. Although I do like one of my guests, Denny Cray, he was actually my very first episode. He's in my podcasting class, and he had to record it because I couldn't figure out how to record. But he has been listening. He's from Florida, and I do have a lot of listeners in Florida. His podcast is about running, but he eats really healthy. And then he was talking to me about the vermiculture, and that's what kind of got me into trying to have a worm bin in my classroom last year, because we eat breakfast in the classroom, and then every day at lunch there's a fruit and salad bar for the kids. And I'm in a district with, I think there's 2,000 students between K-12. And so that's a lot of compostable material that they are. So we at least tried to save the compostable material from my classroom. The one we had a couple of challenges with the worm bin in my classroom. One, I got a class guinea pig, and I put the guinea pig on top of the worm bin with a cardboard barrier, and I thought that would be enough to keep it, but it really needs more air, I think. I have talked to a couple other guests who have talked about, but maybe they open it more or just, I don't know. And then the other problem we had was we ate breakfast in the classroom, and right when we got the worm bin, we switched schedules. So my kids started going to lunch and then going to recess. So I had originally thought we would pick up their lunch materials and bring it back to the classroom. And breakfast is more fruity, and worms really like more greens. They need more of the vegetables that they would get at lunch. So I think we would have had more success if, one, we had left the lid off and it got more air, and two, it wasn't filled with just grapes and citrus and orange peels and pears. And I don't know. I think the worms just needed more lettuces and more greens. Like I needed to pay better attention to that thing. But we did. Like one thing I talk about a lot is growing the lettuce bins in the classroom, because not only was that guinea pig ate 2 full heads of like romaine or green leaf lettuce every single day, and lettuce was like $3.99 a head last winter, just when I was trying to do it. So then once we were able to start growing enough lettuce to feed him in the classroom was so cool. But here we are in Montana in February. Like by the time spring came around, by like April, we were getting enough between the classroom, and then we were bringing a lot of dandelions to supplement him, but I didn't have to buy. But that's like something I really learned that was encouraging, that you can grow, you know, enough lettuce at least to put on sandwiches, or like I've grown a lot of arugula in my apartment. And just the one I struggle with is like the succession planning. Like, so I ate all the lettuce and then I didn't have another bed, so I need to plant another bed and just stuff like that. But your listeners probably want to hear more about like like gardening in their yards.
Well, I think it's interesting that you bring up the schools, because, you know, for as a teacher, and you're also an artist, people should know that too. And, you know, it's really neat that kids can get involved and be able to see that. I think that's so important, that they learn the cycle of life, you know, whether it's, you know, it's trial and error, like you're saying, okay, we're trying this and everything. So that's really neat. So when someone, you know, just going to the composting and actually going out into the garden for the first time saying, okay, I'm going to compost, okay? So it does take a while. Just before we talk about everything you're going to put in it and how to start it, how long does it take to actually get compost that you can use in your garden?
So composting's kind of seasonal, and it depends on you and your situation. Like my brother still lives on Long Island in the suburbs, and him and his wife are really busy. So they basically do one compost pile for the whole year. Like they just kind of collect their scraps through the summer, throw their leaves in, let it sit through the winter, and they get one big giant bin of compost in the spring, and then that's what they put all over their mostly landscaping beds. I mean, my brother and his wife don't do any vegetables. They have quite a few herbs, and then just around like their flowers in their yard and their landscape. Now, my husband and I, because we are focusing more on gardening, and we have between the mini farm and just the beds around our house, we try to in the summer build like during the year. So we're collecting it now. We'll get a good batch in the spring. And then in the heat of summer, when Mike's like mowing the lawn, pretty much to do our lawn, like he'll mow a little piece of lawn every day. And by the time he gets to one end, it's back to the other end during like June and July. And during that time, I'd say we could make a batch of compost within 2 weeks with enough lawn scraps and food from the garden and maybe throw a little dirt in there. So but he uses a lot more. And so, but that's only a short period. I would say maybe June to July, because by August in Montana, there's not enough water. You're not you're not mowing your lawn anymore because it's just not growing enough. It's just kind of short because you almost want to let it grow. Like places where I've seen in our orchard where he's like mowed the outside and the inside he kind of has let grow, and where it's taller on the inside, it's greener. And the part on the outside where he mowed the last time before the drought kind of comes in is much browner. So it's almost better to not mow. But like in the thick of June and July when we're getting a lot of rain, like it'll grow 2 or 3 inches in a few days. Like it just grows really fast at different times. So it all depends on your season and what's happening.
And then, so when you go and start of composting, I mean, do people need to buy a bin, or is it something you can kind of build yourself to put the different layers in?
Those are great questions. So I always talk about for our 14th anniversary, Mike built me my favorite compost bin. So we have, I don't know, one outside the house, one down by the garden, and then he's got like 3 out in what I call the mini farm. And we're kind of always rotating them. But the one that he built, I like it right outside my kitchen. Like for me, gardening needs to be convenient. I want like a kitchen garden. One of these years he's going to build me one right outside my kitchen that has just like things for salads. But the compost pile that he put, it used to be down kind of like a little hill and down closer to the garden where you are going to be using it more. But to have one right outside my kitchen door where I can just, throw the coffee grounds every time I make a pot of coffee just easily, or eggshells, or so the compost bin that's right outside my kitchen directly, it's basically made out of not slats, but like I think they're 1x4s. And it's kind of a box, and then he's built these like slats in the front that you can take out, so it can hold. It's probably like knee high, so it can hold a lot. It's really easy to turn with a pitchfork. So almost every time you go, you're more inclined to turn it a lot. And like I said, air is key. Keeping, turning it. The more you can flip it, especially when you're putting like big bags of lawn clippings in it, to be able to mix that up and just keep it going. Like, I don't know, you'll just kind of get a feel for it. But that's what we use. I know some people have used like, kind of like a plastic garbage can. There's some composting companies out there, especially like I said, like where my mom lives in the suburbs. She has to be more careful about raccoons and about the rabbits getting into it. So she kind of needs to bury it a little more, or some people are going to need to have a screen over it to keep the animals out. So there's all sorts of different situations. And then like for us, it's nice to be able to have like, once one gets full, it maybe takes a few days or maybe the 2 weeks to get it to turning into compost, where Mike will be like, don't throw any more new material in there. And then we'll go use the one that's closer to the garden for a while, or we'll just keep it in pots until he empties that and puts it in the wheelbarrow, or just like he has like a rotation system. But to me, composting is really easy. Like I even like the kids, I'll save all their, because I know there's some debate out there whether kids eat vegetables, but let me tell you, at the beginning of this year when I had Mike grew these purple dragon's tongue green beans, except they weren't really green. They were like white with purple stripes. The kids
Yeah.
love them. They are like, when are you going to have those green beans again? And I'm like looking, I'm like, maybe next fall. We're not going to have green beans again this year. Where are the carrots? And they will eat. They love their fruit and vegetable snack. That they're lucky if they get it 3 days a week. I think is in the afternoon, 2:30. They like to have a snack.
That's neat. I wanted to ask you too. I mean, what is because the terrain about being in Montana? Like you're saying, okay, get longer summers, which is neat, and so you get to be outside a little bit longer. But what do you do in the winter? I mean, do you do any kind of greenhousing, or is it pretty much okay? Do you can any of the things that do you like preserve any of the produce that you harvest through the summer and early fall?
Absolutely. So Mike definitely cans. He pickles beets. He cans carrots. He's trying to build us a root cellar where we can save our potatoes, and golden beets were like amazing last year that he grew and things like that. But before that, you asked me about extending the season. And so, yeah, it's February 17th. We are talking about there's like a blizzard warning coming today. We didn't have school 4 days this week, but he's going to start any day now, I can tell, to start to put seeds. And I posted pictures yesterday on my Facebook group of his seedlings that he had from February 28th last year. So what he's going to do is start putting things in the windows, just small, like he'll put like peppers, like he'll take an old pie pan, a recycled pie pan or something, and fill it full of dirt, and he'll put a whole bunch of pepper seeds in there. And then maybe a month from now, when they're growing and they're maybe an inch high, he'll take a knife and like ever so delicately and patiently transplant them into individual containers. And then he'll have pepper plants. And by then, around March, what he does is, in our situation, it's a little different. We have wood heat with a wood stove, and he used to be a logger, so we have a ton of wood always. And he will plastic off like our porch off our kitchen, and then he like leaves the kitchen window and the kitchen door open. And you can't actually go out that way like while it's plasticed in until like May when he takes the plastic off, but then he uses that as a miniature kind of greenhouse. And so it is almost time to start getting ready, because so the pictures I posted yesterday, these were so cool. Some he took toilet paper tubes and put potting soil, and last year we got this awesome stuff called pit moss, and it's like this stuff you mix in with your potting soil. It makes it more absorbent. It doesn't use peat, which is kind of nice, because I've heard some questionable practices about where people are getting peat delivered from. And so it's a natural recycled type of material. It almost feels like shredded newspaper. And so he mixed that with the dirt, but you don't have to either way. But he put it either in toilet paper tubes, or he put them in eggshells in an egg carton. So he took these eggshells, and then he put the dirt in there, and then he put the seeds in there. And then he'll start with that, just expand. Like he's constantly planting, broccoli seeds and pepper seeds, and just before I know it, there will be this huge. And one year he had 750 starts in that porched-in greenhouse of like peppers, broccoli.
You never know what's going on there.
Tomatoes,
with Mike.
just yeah, and it's
amazing.
been a challenge for us because we haven't had a lot of water, but he's just learned over the years. Every year we try to expand a new bed or two. So, but yeah, it's time to start thinking about that. And then the other cool thing that Mike does that I think is so interesting. Well, one, if you're starting seeds from scratch, he uses a mister instead of watering on top, and he mists like, I don't know how he doesn't get carpal tunnel from running that mister all the time, but just like doing those itty bitty. And then the other thing he does, he builds like miniature greenhouses, like out of your old, your plastic salad container you get your spring greens in, and he'll make that, like he puts the peppers plants in there to kind of make it a heated space inside, and then he shuts the lid, just enough, and it opens that, and so that kind of creates this little itty bitty miniature, greenhouse,
like a terrarium almost. Yeah, that's and I think that's really smart, because part of being organic is using what you have, and not always having to buy some fancy shiny new thing that's using resources of the world. Is using what you already have on hand. Like you're talking about toilet paper rolls, and we've done a lot of that too. Where
so cool.
You can even use old socks and things, all kinds of things to really reuse what we already have on hand. So I think that's a really big part of it. What I wanted to ask too, going into organics, I mean, to me, there's something really amazing about getting it to the point where you're saying, like, take those 3 years to get your soil back to being clean, and having this clean environment. It's beneficial for the wildlife and the bird life as well. And a lot of people don't want to go organic because they're like, we need pesticides. Like you were saying, pests is always a big deal. And from our experiences, that nature takes its course, and it's organic is not just here organic fruits and vegetables. Organic is doing the same thing with your flowers because water runs, everything's connected. And tell us a little bit about the benefits for you being organic and balancing it out. Are you seeing more bird life, and are the birds getting your bugs? Are you seeing that ecosystem happen in your garden?
Absolutely. And so when I interviewed Jean-Martin Fortier, he talks a lot about the biointensive farming and building like a little canopy. And I saw so much, like last year, it just seemed to really click in when I was down on the mini farm with Mike. I would see where he would have that exact biointensive type of planting where you're building like almost a canopy to try to keep the bugs out, and just, surrounding our garden with sunflowers is a huge way to attract. Sometimes the sunflowers attract the negative, the bugs that you want to get out, but they keep them out of they give them something else to eat, and they don't really harm your sunflowers as much, or they definitely attract the beneficial insects in. So it's kind of like a double, like not only do you have these beautiful flowers there, but they're helping with your garden. Mike always plants marigolds and nasturtiums near interplanting in with his tomatoes and cucumbers because those work together to help keep your pests at bay. And
nice.
There's just,
nice.
We totally see that here, the benefits of having, and we definitely get birds. I mean, the sunflower seeds, we do buy a lot of sunflower seeds. We get a lot of birds here in the winter and throughout the summer. And like my sunflowers that I planted one year, my goal was to plant 750 sunflowers was my garden challenge one year. Then I realized if I want to be a flower farmer, I need to plant like 750 sunflowers every week, or maybe 1,000 every week for like 20 weeks, or at least for like 2 to 3 months straight. But if you want to grow sunflower seeds for the seeds, the problem I had was I left them in the garden too long, and the birds just ate them all. I went out it was just like over a course of like a couple of days. All of a sudden I went out there and all the seeds were gone. Like the birds had eaten every seed that I thought I was going to have for the next year. So, because saving your seeds is another thing that people have talked about a lot. Like if you want to save our planet, they keep talking about saving seeds as one of the biggest things that you can do. So,
and that's also that's not just in plants; it's also with the animal breeds, like keeping heritage seeds. It's like we're getting down to here's your one type of turkey left, and there used to be all kinds of turkeys, that people would eat. So it's like it's really interesting how we've ended up like here's one kind of corn that you get on the shelves in a store, but there used to be all these different mazes that would go with the regions. It is really important that we save seeds. And over here in Tucson, Arizona, where we are, we have an organization, a nonprofit called Native Seed Search, and it's about getting back to the roots because we're on the border of Mexico and also have the Tohono O'odham reservation here. And so what we do is, there's this movement to bring back the crops and the plants from the ancient peoples and protect them, and it's so much better for the environment. And if you just go out into nature, you'll find half of those plants that used to be there, or if they're in a protected area, you'll still see them. And so that's a huge movement out here. So is Montana like that? Do you have those kind of I'm just curious. We want to come up to Montana to come see your parks, so I want to know about what it's like out there.
Well, one of my most awesome episodes was this guy, David Schmetterling, who lives in Missoula, which is one of the bigger cities here. But if you look at the pictures on his blog, which I think is called Montana Wildlife Gardener, like when I first called him and was going to do the interview with him, like I thought he lived on 20 acres in the middle of the woods. Like it was just so gorgeous in such a woodland area. And he talks specifically about the Native Plant Society in Montana and how him and his wife only use water irrigate their vegetables and their whole incredibly beautiful landscape. And they have like people come and want to learn about their landscape. He's like, our house stands out in Missoula. People are always walking by to learn because it's all 100% native. And there's a very big Native Plant Society and movement within our state, although I would like it to be more well known. And, that's something that's really important I wanted to mention for your listeners is one thing my show, a lot of people have talked about is like, even if you don't want to grow a garden, like growing landscapes and just like your yard. What is your yard going to look like? And then also the fact that a lot of people don't realize the chemicals that landscapers put on your yard, if you're putting like weed and feed or anything like that just on your grass, that your animals are the closest to it. They're short, your pets. Your kids learn to crawl, and your toddlers, your babies are really low. They're taking in so much more of that. Like the tests that have been done on those chemicals that you're putting on your lawn are based on humans who are adults, and that a child's system is breathing in so much more of those toxic chemicals. And so if you do nothing else, then don't put those chemicals on your lawn, like building your soil. Like Mike and I have shoveled huge shovels full of sprinkled of just cow manure. Or we did get some peat from the wildlife. They dug up this pond. I can't remember how it happened, but like nearby, like, and it was when my husband had his backhoe business and his dump truck. We hauled dump truck loads. Like they were digging up this pond for some reason, and there was just all this peat they gave this woman for sale, and people were buying, like it was like $20 for the soil and then $50 to haul it for the diesel. And just Mike had a really good summer that summer, and we just shoveled that all over our lawn. And that's one of the things that's really helped, putting that natural peat down mix type of stuff, or just like taking care of your lawn. And then another one is like, I talked to this guy, Russ Medge, down in Utah, who has a business called Simply Trees, and he teaches people how to prune trees and the difference between. And I also talked to Dave Salmon down in New Mexico near where you were about the same thing about healthy trees. You're not going to get diseases on your trees if you keep the soil around your trees healthy, if you make sure your roots have room to breathe and to grow down deep. Like just the healthy soil thing has been just huge. And so not putting chemicals on your lawn counts just as much. Not putting chemicals on your flowers, even if you're not eating those flowers, you still don't want to be putting any kind of chemical fertilizers or pesticides on those things that, like you said, the bees are going to eat, the beneficial insects are going to eat, that the birds are going to eat. The monarch butterfly, Dave Salmon wanted to make the monarch butterfly the, kind of, what's it called, like the mascot for the environmental movement, because we need, watching where those butterflies are and making sure they have enough habitat to be able to migrate is like an essential thing. You hear about the bees, but the monarch butterfly is another one too. And just creating an environment and an ecosystem where things can thrive. Like even if you're not growing any food at all, I think is, I don't know, I call my audience green future growers, because we're all, it's not just about just growing vegetables for you to eat. It's like about caring for our whole planet. And then, like you mentioned, I live right by Glacier National Park. I mean, and we're, here in Montana, surrounded by thousands of acres of Forest Service land, and just, caring. And then, like I said, I teach on, so I actually drive through Glacier National Park, a very teeny tiny part of it, every single weekend, going back and forth to work. And so caring for the environment that's so close to one of our greatest treasures is super important.
Yeah, because animals don't really know a boundary, and neither does water, whether it's rainwater or, so there's that balance where, that's I think one of the most important things we do, especially with our Parks and Travel magazine, is really to put that buffer where the community is really important to the park and the park is really important to the community, whether it is a, full-time community or, the visiting community. So whatever your footprints are now, even in parks now, they're asking here, like they do it. I know we did an interview with Park Ranger Beth Hudick out in Pinnacles National Park in Central California, and we've hiked around that area. And she was talking about how invasive species go out there into parks, and how you have to be careful that you're not taking a fungus through and into parks and into caves that are killing off these bats. Well, it all comes from what we're putting in our gardens. The gardening community has a direct relationship with our parks and our protected wilderness lands, especially farmers and farming, because especially on mass scale. So whatever we're putting out on our crops or our flowers or even our herb garden or even our patio garden is going to affect the protected places. So even here in Saguaro National Park, we went hiking a couple weeks ago, and lo and behold, right there's a big boot brusher. So before you get on a trail, they're asking you to clean your shoes before you get on a trail, so you're not bringing in
Sure.
buffalo grass and things like that, because we, as gardeners, are actually affecting these parks. I love what you're talking about, is protecting those, keeping that buffer, so it's a natural, a clean natural habitat as it should be. Even if a bird crosses over that boundary, how dare you cross over?
Or the buffalo leave the park in Yellowstone. That kills
Oh,
me.
that's cool. So you get to see buffalo and all kinds of cool critters out there. That's got to be neat, What kind do you get deer in your garden or anything like that? What kind of wildlife have you seen?
Disclaimer really quick, we don't have buffalo walking out of the park here where I am, because that's
No.
Yellowstone's on the southern side of the state, but we definitely have deer, elk. We haven't seen a lot of bears at my house, but I have neighbors very close by who have had to have bear, the fish, wildlife, and parks people come through. And we have mountain lions. I mean, but Mike has, without a doubt, in Montana, and it doesn't matter if you're in town or out of town, deer are definitely, you have to have a deer fence. I mean, you're not going to grow anything. They're going to eat it. I mean, there's I don't think they eat peonies. There's a couple of flowers you can plant that they don't eat, but for the most part, and we actually had, a incident last summer, and I keep telling Mike, it's better that it happened in the spring. Don't be so upset about it. But he lost basically all of his tomatoes and a lot of his peppers because somehow the gate got left open one night and the deer got in. But I'm like, it's better that it happened in May than it happened in August, and they got every single thing because there were 3 deer in there when he went down in the morning. But you cannot deer just. So when we very first started out, and I was saying we had those 2 beds that were like 4x8, he built like these little triangle things on the sides made out of like chicken wire, and then he had 2 8x4 just really light chicken wire. I don't know how to explain it. It's kind of like a window or something like that you could just pull off and put down. They were really light and easy to pick up and move, and that's how we kept the deer out in the very beginning. I mean, it was kind of frustrating, but now he's just built tons of fence. And like I was saying, the problem is the chicken gets over the fence, but the chickens have not figured out how to get into the mini farm yet, and cross my fingers, because I think he'd be done with me if the chickens got into the mini farm. But for some reason they don't. But they walk completely around. Like we have 260 feet of fence around off each edge of our house, and they walk around it, but they can jump in and out and over it, and they know how to fly over it all the time. But the fence around the mini farm is the exact same fence, but they don't get in there for some reason. But definitely, creatures are tough. A lot of my guests have talked about gophers. One woman talked about putting wine bottles, and they were she buried them one every foot, and somehow they must have been neck up because she put a stick and then a tin can on it to make noise. And for some reason, because she was really close to the Canadian border, and she said for some reason that worked pretty good for keeping the moles out. But definitely moles, gophers, those type of things, everybody struggles with around here too.
Wow, we had a bottle garden too when we were in the Joshua Tree area, because our very first show, because Sunday's a Champagne Sunday show, so we were doing borders, and we got tired of buying border stuff, and we're like, well, this is stupid, it's like reuse, like what you're talking about, what Mike does. So after our radio show, we'd have our champagne, and we'd go take our bottle and plant it, and that's how we did our garden borders with bottles, champagne bottles. And then we found that we're not the only ones who do that. We found it was a national park in Louisiana when we were at Cane River and National Historical Park at one of the plantations. It was a bicentennial farm, these gigantic oak trees with these resurrection ferns growing on them. I mean, huge oak trees, right, that have been there for hundreds of years. And we're walking around, and right at the front of the plantation house is a garden with all these daylilies and all these different flowers, and guess what the beds were? Wine bottles. So we figured that we're part of that movement of the bottles. But I'd never thought about putting a stick in cans with that. That's pretty cool. That's smart. See, I like this. That's how you work with the environment. Use what you have. I love that. I want to tell everybody also, again, Jackie's website to go and listen to the podcast. Anybody getting started or already in it, go take a listen. Go to organicgardenerpodcast.com. com, and you've also got some great resources on there. You, all the guests that you've been on, you have their books up there that people can get, but also some of your own things. You've got your art note cards. Nature people are going to love those, but also you have an ebook that you also have, and a PDF book, 7 awesome ways to find more time to garden. That's very cool. So that's when someone signs up for your newsletter, they get that, right?
Yep. And then we also came up with a thing that over Christmas break called freegardencourse.com, and you can go there, and we develop and actually it's like a work in progress because it's supposed to be like one lesson a month. And so the first 6 lessons are up, so you can, if you're a brand new beginner, and we put a lot of just facts and information, things I've learned from the show and stuff that Mike's done to just help people, because like I said, our goal is to teach people and just to help save our planet for our grandkids and for other kids and just the birds and the animals, and just so we have a healthier place to live.
Right on, right on. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Now I'm going to close with some music for you, because you are out in the beautiful, Montana, the big blue skies, and you've got the mountains and the national park right behind you there. I want to play a song for you. It's called Alpenglow, because you get Alpenglow where you are. That beautiful. I know. That is so beautiful, and we can't wait to get up there. But this song is called Alpenglow, and it's and because you're a teacher, I wanted to play this too. You're a teacher of kids and of gardening. It's from a young man called Everin Ozan, and he is a NAMI Award winner, the Native American Music Awards. When he was 9 years old, he went on a cross-country trip with his mom, and they stopped at the Grand Canyon, and he went into a little shop and bought a Native American flute and just started playing. I mean, literally. And he ended up winning all these awards, being in the National Geographic. And this is off of his album Alluvia. He's done 3 albums, and he's written all this music here on this album. And, now he's a pilot. He's a downhill skateboarder champion, too, for California. And he still goes to schools and recreates powwows and teaches them Native American music. But seeing him perform is amazing. Like, the lights go out, and it's like he's channeling something. It's just really, really beautiful. And I just thought, you know what? You're up in the big, big country of big mountains and big skies, so I wanted to play Alpenglow. So here it is, everyone. You can go to ozanmusic.com to learn more about Everin. But thank you so much, Jackie. It's been a real pleasure having this great gardening chat with you.
Oh, my gosh. This has been so wonderful. I feel like we're like kindred, just friends that we have so much in common. So thank you so much for letting me share, and I hope your listeners will check out my show if they're interested in learning.
And go get worming, everybody. Composting and worming. It's fun. So everyone, again, it's organicgardenerpodcast.com. Here it is, Alpenglow. Take care, Jackie.
All right, you too, Lisa.